Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control and every executable in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind by visiting securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. I'll be running a panel cast with Fastly titled Security Without Speed Bumps using WAF Simulator to transform DevSecOps workflows. You can join me for this exciting webcast on April 16th. To register for this panel cast, we have the best URL ever. It's just securityweekly.com/WAF. WAF. securityweekly.com/WAF. After all those codes for Identiverse and stuff like that, I love having something that's just 3 characters. Super simple. All right. And now it's time for the weekly security news. You can go to securityweekly.com/ESW 400 if you want to follow along as we go through the news or for links to the articles we're covering. And I totally intended about 10 episodes ago to do something special for episode 400. And life just happened and we got busy and it was, didn't happen, but it is episode 400. I joined around episode 200. So this is, sometimes I go on vacation, somebody babysits a podcast. So I've probably done a little less than 200, but yeah, big milestone for me. And I've not kept track of how many that you guys have done though. But that is something I could do for a future episode. Let you guys know when you hit milestones.
It's a single digit and I couldn't tell you.
It might not be a single digit at this point, Jackie. You've done quite a few already. So I can set that up in Notion because I've got everything in Notion and Notion does charts now. I bet it can automatically calculate how many episodes co-hosts have done for me. If one of you gets on like a long thing today, I'll probably go build that in Notion while you're talking.
You have us as a drop down in a Notion database. And so you have us linked. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. You're in there. Yep.
Adrian's keeping notes on everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounded very ominous when you said that, but I do list the co-host because I have to introduce you in every episode.
Likely story.
He's grabbing OPSEC. He's like grabbing OPSEC of us, like, when we disclose like doctor appointments, and he's like, oh, let's add that to the host detail. Oh, what password manager are you using? Okay, here we go.
The problem is I have 4 different fields for co-hosts, but based on who can make it or who can't make it, like Jackie, you might be in the first slot or the second slot or the third slot or the 4th slot. So it's probably not going to be as smooth as I was thinking it was going to be. I don't know.
Saying you established a really shitty data schema.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to point out this database management.
It was not built for analysis. It was just built for podcast workflow. Anything else it does is a bonus for me.
So what you're saying is you're not using a common event format.
Man, I am getting beat up here.
Are you surprised? We
Team
have
up on Adrian.
Sugar and high caffeine.
Maybe that's the theme for 400. We roast Adrian, but
we're already there. It's already happening. Might as well.
At least you're not
trying to celebrate somehow.
All right, first story.
At least you're not 23 and me, Adrian.
Ooh, yeah. And we're not even talking about that today. What a mess. I am. Yeah. That it's funny. Everybody's like, delete your data off 23andMe. I'm like, you still have data there? Like they already lost it like 2-3 times, didn't they?
Yeah.
Like people acting like now that it's in bankruptcy and somebody's going to buy it, now you're going to break trust with. Now you have issues. Like I feel like you should have had issues a long, long ago with that company.
Yeah. So I
Anyway.
want to ask you guys, because I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they're not in security, and they asked me, so what's the worst thing that could happen if somebody buys this data? So what's your worst dystopian fear of what could happen if somebody buys your DNA?
That's a good one.
Probably coming down to the relationships between people, because my understanding is a lot of the DNA, it can make jumps to who you're related to, depending on how they did it. So even if you didn't,
and that can lead to legal cases.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've seen murder solved that way.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of murder docs.
There's a lot of concerns about the other thing that I remember from it may not have been 23andMe, but basically there was not exactly full DNA data, but representative data in the actual database, which sounds kind of scary.
Yeah, that's I wonder if it is like what that data actually is that they're handing off, because like with your biometrics, Jackie, you were talking about that a bit. That's not actually stored on device. They create like a data entry, based off an algorithm that takes numbers off of your thumbprint or whatever. So, there's not, and they used to do this in the past, just in case they wanted to change the algorithm. They could reanalyze that image, and they keep like a TIFF image or something like that around. But, these days it's just numbers. Like if they update the algorithm, you have to re-enroll your biometrics. So I wonder if the DNA results are kind of like that, if they're things that refer back to the analysis, or if you get any of that core data from the DNA, or if they just had to. I don't know how any of that works. Like, I feel like for us to answer that question, Jackie, we'd have to know more about what's in that data that they've got.
Yeah. What about you, Eamon? What's the worst thing somebody could do with your DNA?
I mean, it's not now, but I guess in the future, some sort of cloning or whatnot.
Little Eamons?
Frame you for a crime?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually the one that was my dystopian fear, is I was like, police all use one of a handful of different tools for DNA, and it's not inconceivable that you could do some type of weird man in the middle, like swap one profile for another, and all of a sudden open and shut case, you're basically screwed. So that was like, or the opposite of that, which would be like super sophisticated biological weapons, right? So like the equivalent of mRNA vaccines, but mRNA weapons, something that could cause mutation,
could target somebody's genetic defects or something like that.
Yeah, or just like if I'm an adversary that has a large, pretty homogenous population, and I want to target a different adversary that has a different, large, differently homogenous population, I'm sure there are some links in DNA that impact some populations.
Help you with chemical
others.
weapons.
We know that related to some diseases that disproportionately impact different people.
Or even target
on that cheerful note
and their vulnerabilities. So yeah.
Good thing we're not talking about it.
Yeah, good thing we're not talking about this 23andMe thing
today.
Yeah.
The world, like this shit really hit the fan the last couple weeks.
All right. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some funding. And now for something completely different. So one of the things I love about Mike Prevet's weekly newsletter, the security funded newsletter that goes over acquisitions, funding, stuff like that, is he's got this vibe check. And like the first versions of it were just kind of funny, were entertaining. And then he started getting more serious with it. And now I find myself really kind of going into this newsletter. And that's the first thing I scroll to and I check out because he's actually asking the types of questions vendors, I think buyers and sellers would be interested in the answer of. And this week it was, as a security leader, what's the toughest decision you have to make? And unsurprisingly, nobody, like it's many things, right? It's not one thing. But three things were very close. The top was balancing security and business needs. The second was adopting new tech versus reducing complexity. And then the third, all very close together, all three of these, when to push back on leadership. So I found that really interesting. That sounded like you have some thoughts, Eamon.
Oh yeah, it's all about choosing your battles. That's what it is. So, but yeah, that's a really, yeah. I have too much to say on this, but yeah.
I think number 4 would have to be technical debt as well. The things that they can't get rid of that are just just
You're stuck with.
embedded. Yeah, literally embedded in many situations.
Well, but there's no decision to be made there, right? That's not a tough decision. You're just kind of stuck with it, right?
Well, depends on what it is, I suppose.
Yeah. Or that's another battle that you choose, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know this is changing and that we are now seeing kind of business background CISOs, but I think the one to push back on leadership is kind of a symptom of a problem that has to do with communication. And that if you're needing to push back on leadership because they're saying no to something that is necessary, it's generally because you haven't found a way to tie what you need to what they need or want and how they're being measured. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm super focused on research wise as an analyst this year is like, how do we better enable CISOs to be, unfortunately, politicians, sometimes internal influencers, how to instead of have them focused on the objective of security, take a step back to the executive level and say, what is my CEO interested in? What's going to make him look good to the board? What's going to make the CFO look good to the board? And how do I tie those things to this buying decision as
A
desperately
mutual
as
scratching
possible?
of backs.
Yeah. You have to understand that as a CISO, like you have customers and it's everybody else in the organization. And you got to kind of, you know,
That's
when
a
it
really
comes
great
to an
point.
executive team, there's probably what 2 to 5 of you. And so you got to keep in mind that you're all volleying for the same praise and success.
What's interesting is that deciding where to invest was not a big deal, right? So that's wasn't the biggest one. So it's
Yeah, I
like,
should have called that out. Yeah.
oh yeah, you mentioned it in your comments. It's like, and because sometimes it's more of a process change, right? And so when you're trying to do security, you're trying to improve the culture, and a lot of the tools are available there. I mean, like take MFA, right? Do you have MFA using SMS, or are we using like Google Authenticator or some sort of push technology that's built into most apps? And but that involves friction and change and whatnot.
Right.
And so that leads to the other thing where you're trying to balance security and the business needs. Like, okay, I have this list of pile of things. Any CISO comes into an environment, they spend the first week or two, or a month really, or at least assessing and keep pilling, and then now they have to keep prioritizing, and every week it's different.
Yeah.
I think the way security ebbs and flows too, it's hard because when you need to undertake some of these initiatives, they require labor, but that labor can't be sustained. And so, progress
Yeah.
in security is never even. It's you kind of have these big sprints, and it almost is like war. Like you watch MASH, and there'll be the times between battles. Nobody knows what MASH is. God, I'm
Downtime.
old.
Yeah.
But the times where they're all just kind of laying around on their cots waiting
We're
for
all old
something to
enough.
happen. And I think like that's security. And so then you become a cost center, right? So when you're trying to take a breath between big initiatives that you can tie to revenue, then you're just a cost center, and it's hard to sustain when corporate budgets call for this like linear, predictable spend. And security is a very like, we need to react to whatever's going on right now, which is not linear in any fashion.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting putting it that way. Yeah. But yeah, to Eamon's point, there's so much you can do without spending $1, right? Like just taking the mess that's already there, and trying to clean up that. So speaking of spending budget, Island secured $250 million, $250 million, and their valuation is nearly $5 billion. It's interesting because they're starting to get to that size where the acquisition pool is going to lessen, and I'm not sure a browser's a thing you can IPO with. So I would assume that they would be eventually looking for an acquisition there, or they could expand and start doing acquisitions themselves. So I think the options are different now than they used to be even 5 years ago, but definitely 10 years ago. Like if a security vendor got big, it would IPO or get acquired. And I don't think anybody wants to IPO right now in this market, and I can't blame them. So it'd be interesting to see what happens to them. There are a bunch of other browsers out there. We didn't see a whole lot of other startups in the space because it's so costly to build a browser.
Yeah.
We've seen some, like Chrome extensions, quite a few of those. We've seen like CyberArk's built a browser. Like there's a couple of existing vendors that have built browsers. And again, I don't know if those are just extensions or if they really built their own stuff. But yeah,
So
Palo
I
Alto and
I
Island are
have
the
a
two big ones, right?
crazy conjecture. So the FTC is trying to force Google to sell Chrome, right?
Right.
So it would be really interesting if somebody came in to buy Island and Chrome, because then you'd have like regular mode, incognito mode, and then like hyper secure mode. And it's one of the other pieces where, yeah, so that's, I don't know.
Well, Chrome
I
is one
actually
of the
want to
main
hear what
competitors
Sean
here.
thinks about Island, because Sean's an identity
Yeah.
expert. And I think Island's a really interesting tactic for solving some of this insecurity.
And the enterprise version of Chrome is a direct competitor here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Do you have
find it very
thoughts, Sean?
interesting because, building a browser is, like Adrian said, is expensive, and it's I mean, it's the most hostile environment that we have is in the browser, and yet we use our browser to do most things these days. So therefore, the browsers have to be incredibly performant, have the ability to run just about any app that we want, and also be able to resist attacks from a variety of different situations and scenarios. So it's having a secure browser is something that definitely is interesting. I mean, we have Chrome, we have the Chromium browsers. I mean, Edge, Microsoft gave up. So when Microsoft gives up, there's usually a reason behind that.
They're all Chromium browsers now, almost.
Yes,
all the major ones. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Firefox is busy setting itself on fire or whatever they're doing over there at Mozilla. It's way too much drama for a browser company.
I know, and I was so loyal to them for so many years, and then just ended up having to switch to Chrome because they fell behind feature wise. But
Yeah.
So I used a similar kind of philosophy browser when I worked at Fidelity way back in like 2005. So they had an enterprise browser. You couldn't access Internet Explorer on your Windows machine, and it was very locked down in terms of what you could access from it, but also was able to give you access to like viewing the customer's account through as if you were the customer on the website. So you could tell them exactly what to do trying to troubleshoot, which is something you would typically reserve for, technical and IT teams. But because this browser was so locked down, prevented screenshots, all these things, you could give access to customer service to features you normally couldn't. And so it was surprising to me when I moved on and there were significantly laxer restrictions on most corporate laptops. So I love the idea, to your point. I hope they can execute. It's a lot of money. It's a decent valuation. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. All right, moving on to so VulnCheck is an interesting one. Vulnerability intelligence, exploit intelligence, whatever you want to call them. Not entirely unique, but fairly unique. Most of the others that do this in the market are either non-US based companies, and all the examples are leaving me right now. But yeah, interesting approach. I think if you want a vulnerability management program that tries to prevent threats, you pretty much have to take an intel approach. You can't wait for a vulnerability scanner to come back and tell you what you're vulnerable to, because by then, the chances are pretty good you've already been hit with an exploit on it, given how quickly exploit development is happening after disclosure these days. But yeah, interesting company doing a lot of interesting work. They have a lot of free stuff that you can go out and grab. So a lot of cool resources on their GitHub and stuff like that. But certainly worth checking out if you spend a lot of time on vulnerability management like I do. Orion Security is interesting. This is not a DSPM vendor. They're kind of pitching themselves as DLP 2.0, which is what I used to jokingly call DSPM before I learned more about what DSPM did. So this is very interesting to me because very rarely do you see, if there's going to be market disruption, a single vendor doing it, right? Like even with enterprise browsers, we saw Talon and Island release almost at the same time, raise the same amount of money. So even in that case, you had two. So I'm kind of waiting for the rest of this stuff to hit the market. But to quote somebody I was talking to yesterday, DLP is the most disappointing market they've ever seen in information security. Paraphrasing there, it's not exactly their words, but yeah, most disappointing market was definitely in there. And and yeah, I would love to see, I've held out hope before, but we need DLP to work to do so many other things, like to figure out what data is stored on devices. What's like just the classification piece is the piece that always seems to be broken. Too many false positives, too many different types of data to try and discover and classify. So yeah, no pressure, Orion, but they raised a $6 million seed. I don't think I mentioned that bit. So this is just a seed raise, early days. I don't know how much of a functional product they have, but I would love to start hearing whether or not there's anybody out there that can figure out DLP and make it not a nightmare.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the detection, it essentially goes through and classifies things, and then it tries to tell AI to figure out whether that stuff should be sent out or not. I still don't think this gets to the root of the problem, which is that things need to be classified when somebody creates or stores them, not when we're trying to decide whether they should be sent out or not. But
that is the most accurate way to do it for sure. But yeah, prompting users for every document, I don't know. I mean, certainly automatically you should be able to capture a lot, I would think, right?
Well,
in the metadata.
I don't understand why we're not doing this, and basically intelligently scanning a document. And if that shit has stuff on it that you shouldn't have access to based on your level, then freeze the document, because the worst thing
some companies have data classification standards where you are supposed to do that. You are supposed to label things as with different classifications. And there have been products out there to do that. I remember from back in the day, Titus was a company that did this. I don't know what happened to them. It was a company I used to track when I was at 451. But yeah, and basically that's what they did.
Understanding the context in like a screenshot, because it's great that you classify that PDF, but what happens when somebody else takes a screenshot of it and sends it as a JPEG or PNG, and you don't realize that that's what happened? So I mean, good companies have these things in place, but good companies aren't the only companies that get breached.
Like Microsoft Recall takes a screenshot like that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that this we're still creating things to solve symptoms of a problem that needs to be solved at the source.
All right. At this point, I don't want to spend any time really talking about number two. I feel like everybody's probably tired of hearing about Wiz at this point, but I do want to hear what you guys want to talk about. I want to throw it to one of you. Any particular stories that you guys are excited about in here?
Oh, from any of them?
Yeah.
Oh. They're all interesting. It's I mean, the MCP.
So number three.
Yeah,
I'll pick one. Number three is anybody this is my first time even hearing MCP, and it's just casually dropped on here. Build and deploy. So there's a Cloudflare blog. Build and deploy remote model context protocol servers to Cloudflare. Totally makes sense that there would be a thing called MCP. So this is basically like middleware that determines for agentic AI, like where to send stuff to. So it connects you to all the APIs and things like that agentic might need. But I had never heard about it before, basically yesterday. So,
well, let me tell you, I went down an MCP rabbit hole because my friend went down a deeper rabbit hole several weeks ago, and I'm like, wait, what? What's MCP? And I'm like, and he just gave me this whole thing. It's I need to dig up my notes. I had to take notes. That's how we were just casually chatting. But yeah, MCP is wild. There's MCP registries where people are creating MCPs, and it's basically advanced prompts and I'm probably butchering it, but like you said, like just a common recipes of prompts and agentic workflows, for example, for whatever. There's one for like Gmail. Say you want to build a Gmail add-on, right? Which I've been wanting to do for a while. Well, just pull the MCP for Gmail that has already all the stuff built in already. So it gives you such a head start for building that add-on, right? And on and on and
it's like
on.
a container. Like it's just like a specialized container, but for like AI, right? So it comes with all of like you're like, hey, I need a container that does this, and it gives you
it's
all of
kind of
the
like
stuff.
SOAR integrations, right? It's like having, here's a whole library of things that you can hook into your agent, right?
Or like for if you want to build an agent that does this, here's all
Right.
the context you need for that purpose, and then all the things that it needs to connect to do that, is my understanding, but that might be incorrect.
Yeah, you got the prompts, you got the API hookups. All you got to do is drop in the key, blah 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 blah. Like it's all like these recipes. I
So like
guess that's
Eamon was saying, if you're using, Google Workplace and you have Gmail at your work and you're like, I want to build a chat bot for Gmail that, works in my workplace, you don't have to pull packages in and do all of that stuff. It's like, we already know that you're going to need these things and access to these services. And I think it's supposed to start intelligently providing like real-time access to those services, but that might also be another vendor I met with.
So I presume if Cloudflare is doing this, I would imagine maybe AWS and Azure, the other cloud providers already have like MCP services. Do they?
not that I heard of, but I don't know. I mean,
I don't know.
It looks like they're
Cisco
using
had this
OAuth
thing
for
Cisco had
authentication.
this thing they rolled out called, they were like AI pods. And I want to say, I think it was similar, but I read that
Okay.
press release like 2 months ago. So,
Well, we are still learning on this one. So if you know anybody that would be good to bring on the show and talk about MCP, Eamon, I don't know if who you were talking to would be good to come on. Yeah, it'd be great. Yeah, it's one of the things I love to do on this show is like, I don't understand this. Who can come on and explain it to me? Because if you're going to explain it to me, you might as well explain it on the show. So then, all our audience also gets the same benefit out of that.
Yeah, sure. And I dropped a couple links to some directories. You can see examples. It's just some fun rabbit hole. Like I just want to like take some time off and play with this stuff.
I was just saying that to my partner the other day. I was saying there are, and I think it was right after seeing MCP. I was like, I need a week to just play with stuff.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Because now I've got a system with a decent GPU in it. And I've just started making a list of all these things. I feel like I'm getting left behind.
Well,
but I need to play with a bunch of this
to make
stuff.
you feel better. The good thing is if you're procrastinating or busy or whatever it is, like me, I'm just, no time to do this stuff. The more you wait, it's actually the easier it's becoming to play with it. So
that's true.
You can take some solace in that.
Yeah,
Procrastination
I had to do this shit with Python.
Yeah, right.
And I am not good at Python, so this stuff used to take me days and days and days. And yeah, it's cool. And I looked it up. The Cisco AI pods do something similar, but with the infrastructure side. So similarly to having these kind of context-based models, Cisco provides the context-based infrastructure you're going to need, like access to this pool, access to. So I think we're starting to see a lot more of the packagizing of things because hopefully this is because we're starting to narrow and specify use cases for these things. So to Eamon's point, like rather than just here's AI, use it for stuff. It's no, here's a set of things to build an email thing. Here's a set of things to build so that we achieve better out of the box operation.
I mean, I even saw, just like you have Cursor and stuff that are helping you code. Well, now I saw someone create an app. This is a business, apparently, that was just a DevOps IDE. So it's an IDE for doing Terraform and DevOps stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, that is super specific. But I think that's where we're going, like you said, Jackie.
I did put those links in the show notes. And all right, I think we should move on to the next thing. Sean, anything in here tickling your fancy?
I mean, it's all interesting. I'm gonna go with Eamon's response. Nothing specific.
Okay, so I want to talk about Napster because I
Oh my
have
God.
a really
That's a
interesting
squirrel story. We're
personal.
supposed to save that for the end. But fine,
Oh,
go
but
ahead.
I
but
was waiting. I was
if
like,
we don't
okay,
have
let's
anything
wait.
else we want to talk about, I have a really freaking
We
weird
do,
connection
but
to this.
go ahead with Napster. Go ahead,
Okay, so the
take it away.
CEO of
Take it away, Jack.
Napster is a guy by the name of Jonathan Vlaspoulos, and Jonathan Vlaspoulos used to be the head of music at Roblox. And so, for anybody who
Really?
has known me for more than a couple of years, I lost my fucking mind at the beginning of the pandemic and thought that it would be a good idea to throw a digital music festival in Minecraft. And unfortunately for me, between a whole bunch of artists having nothing better to do and my PR team absolutely knocking the ball out of the park, this thing blew up in a way that it should never have blown up. Like, I had a 45-minute special on ESPN. We were on every major media outlet. Every artist in music signed up for this thing. So we ended up with 100 Minecraft stages across, with 1,000 artists across. You would not believe the AWS infrastructure. And while I was doing this, Jonathan actually reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, I run music at Roblox. Like, do you have time to just chat about your strategy and things like that?" And so I connected with him. He is one of the coolest people ever. Like, he was so nice. I don't know. He was so supportive. And the kind of TLDR of this music festival is it imploded for numbers of reasons. I didn't know how to manage partnerships. I didn't know how to manage technical
It's a whole
integrations.
episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was my first successful startup. um, but yeah, so I I want to talk about this because I think it's really fascinating, because when I saw that he had left and went to Napster, I was like, what in the ever loving, Napster is still a thing. What could they
Yeah.
possibly and
Right.
it's actually not a terrible valuation. So I think it's worth talking about, like, some of these legacy technologies and intellectual property and things like that that people think are not worth a lot. Like, sometimes these things are worth investing in. They're worth spending money on. They're not as dead as you think they are. Because what did they sell for? They sold for over $200 million.
Yeah, 207. Do
Which,
you grok what they're doing though? What they're pitching for it?
yeah. So my understanding is one of the biggest issues that I had throwing a digital music festival, or just working with music in general, even managing DJs and physical music festivals, is music rights. And so I think part of what they're trying to do is help address that with, and some of this is they're integrating into the metaverse and the 3D internet. So I think there's also a desire to try to address the need for content and things like that via various mediums where music rights have not necessarily been structured to achieve that. So there've been music rights is this really weird thing, and that there's like a handful of large rights agencies. And we were talking about this, Adrian, when you were trying to get music for a podcast. And if
Yeah.
you don't
Nobody
use one
ever
of
got
these,
back in touch with me. Yeah.
no, and if you don't use one of these large agencies, it's very difficult to protect your own music, because they have the technology and the compute power to crawl the internet looking for people violating your license or copyright. But without that, it's almost impossible. I mean, people just steal work, and with AI and AI generated music and all of these things, it's becoming really prevalent. And so, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that uh that this is a thing. And I think I had kind of commiserated with John when I was working on this festival, that because, like, the right that you need to play a piece of music is not the same as the right you need to include it in a mix as a
Yeah.
DJ, is
Oh,
not the same
it's
right
nuts. They
is not
ask
the
you a
same right that you
million
need to add
questions. I had to fill
video.
out so many questions on how long are you going to use it for? What are you going to use it for? Are you going to use the song in its entirety or just a piece of the song? Like just this long list. I'm like, are they really like calculating like a custom amount just based on all this? It's insane. I had no idea it was so complex.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, because, like, you need this thing called a sync license if you're going to use music
Right.
in a video that's going to be recorded, because that technically creates a new product. And then,
Mhm.
like, it's just, and I wouldn't care if the artists were getting this money. They are not.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Artists do not make money on their music for the most part because they have to sell their rights
It's
to
tiny.
record
Yeah.
labels, rights agencies, and things like that. And so it's one of those things where this is probably one of the spaces that AI could help a lot in, and that making it easier to detect when your rights have been violated, making it easier to enforce copyright. But unfortunately, when YouTube tried to get better at enforcing copyright and things like that, people weaponized the system. People were issuing takedown notices against music that didn't belong to theirs, and it was a shit show. So yeah, it's I I love this because I don't know, it was so bizarre to see it pop up and be like, what parallel universe am I living in where I know
Yeah,
the
where
CEO
Napster's
of
relevant.
Napster
Yeah.
30 years after
Yeah.
yeah.
It'll be
Yeah.
interesting. When I first got I bought an Oculus Quest early on because I often buy gadgets in the early days just to see what they're doing, see what's actually innovative, what's terrible. And they were trying to do virtual events. So I attended a basketball game wearing the Oculus headset, and you're sitting in the stands next to other people. So you can not only hear the basketball game and watch the basketball game, you can hear the voices of the people virtually sitting near you, which is weird. And they called it Oculus Events, I think, back then. Or
Yeah.
they
Yep.
probably rebranded it Meta Events or something like that. But they also did I think it was a Billie Eilish concert the same way, where you could attend it virtually. And it was, and it sounds kind of like what they're wanting to do here is they're calling it Web3, but I don't know that, like
I feel like
that
that was
brings up,
co-opted
makes
by
me think
crypto.
more crypto than
Yeah.
Meta
And the
headset.
other thing that
Yeah.
they're doing that I think is really smart, although I'm not actually sure from a regulation standpoint, is they're combining selling DLC, like digital content, with physical goods. So not only will you be able to attend that concert in this 3D space, you'll be able to buy, a t-shirt for your avatar to wear, and also a t-shirt for you to wear. And that
Right,
is
right.
something that I feel like in Fortnite, I was talking about my kids and I play Fortnite.
Billions
I
based on
spend a
just that, right?
stupid
Yeah.
amount of
Rocket
money on
League,
that app.
all these games, same thing, just selling digital skins. Yeah, it's
And
just
I've
yeah,
wondered why the physical twins
just
are not.
bitmaps.
Yeah, well, and I wonder why the physical twins are not incorporated, because it seems like a no-brainer in terms of an impulse buy, that I'll spend $5 on a pair of bunny slippers in Fortnite. I
Yeah,
would spend 40 to get the equivalent in the real world. So that it
yeah,
should be a thing. And that was
interesting.
when, looking at building the digital music festival, when, a lot of people would ask us when we were promoting it, what are you going to do when things reopen? Because it was during the pandemic. And I was telling them, I was like, I think there's still an opportunity to do these kind of live virtual co-events and merge the two, where no, I can't be at Coachella, but I can be at a Coachella music festival in Minecraft or in Roblox or in
Right,
Fortnite. And
virtual.
so
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't want to try to make
yeah,
myself sound like I was some visionary, because this was only 5 years ago, but it's cool to see some validation in the enterprise value given to Napster,
yeah.
and that this may be
Well,
a model that
you
works.
need enough of the technology out there to do something like this, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like the Quest 2, the Quest 3, they've gotten a lot more out there. The prices are low enough. Uh, I don't know what Apple was thinking being at the $3,500 price point, but
Well, and they've shown that it's mostly kids using Oculus anyway, right? And that's the
yeah,
case in my house. It's almost
yeah,
always my kids who are using it. And so part of me wonders if there's just going to be a little bit of a lag until those kids who have been using those headsets become young adults with disposable
right,
income. And then all of a sudden
yeah,
we'll see a pick back up, almost like in video games. There was a decent lag kind of after Nintendo and Sega. And then all of a sudden and you see kind of these lumps where all of a
yeah,
sudden these generations get more disposable income and embrace the tech.
yeah. All
Sorry,
right.
I squirreled us too early, but I
No,
figured it
it's
would
good.
take a long time to get through that, and I didn't I didn't want to miss it, because shout out to John, who was very nice to me in a very difficult portion of my professional career.
All right, back to security. I do want to mention number 2, our story on Wiz here. W is for Wiz, Alphabet's audacious acquisition. First of all, great alliteration there. Cole Gromas goes really deep into the deal rationale of this. So, despite all the things you've probably read, if you haven't read his take, I think it's worth a read in him talking about why Google did this deal and why Wiz and why they went after them so hard that even after getting turned down at $23 billion, they came back and made the $32 billion acquisition happen. But yeah, remarkable deal for, broke a bunch of records, biggest security acquisition ever, highest multiple on a deal ever, quickest security company we've seen grow this much. The multiple is 46x. So they get paid 46 times annual revenue, which is $700 million. Like, that's not a small amount of revenue. Like, we've seen a few other valuations. One other, Auth0, that was close to that, but a much smaller deal, and some others that are half that, also much smaller deals. So the fact that it's the biggest multiple ever and the biggest acquisition ever is notable. I can't imagine us seeing many more of these deals. This seems like a big outlier.
No, and I think this is brilliant on Google's part, because I think one of the realities Google's having to contend with right now is they are not going to expand on traditional compute. So the way that Azure is growing, the way that AWS is growing, Google doesn't have the infrastructure to grow like that. So most of Google's cloud business is driven by workplace and associated products. People are not processing heavy payloads and heavy AI models on Google Cloud independently. They're doing it through Gemini. And so I think for Google to try to build the physical data center and infrastructure they would need to compete with Azure and AWS on a cloud computing scale is going to be impossible. The other thing that Google is really freaking bad at, and I hope they don't hate me after this, is marketing. Yeah. And, so when I was talking
except for that one time that they sponsored this show.
Yeah. So
I applauded that. Everyone liked that.
Yeah, well, Dave Vellante at theCUBE and I were talking about this, and I told him, I was like, Google builds toys. They build useful toys, but they build toys. When they acquired Mandiant, it was like, you just hired a bunch of armored security guards and you're trying to sell them to your toy customers with no context. And then Chronicle kind of floundered for a while, made no sense. They had no marketing around it. They changed it to security operations, which I've bitched many times on this show, is so generic that it's a Google product with shitty SEO. And so Wiz brings them a number of things. It brings them multi-cloud business, so they get to drink a little bit of the milkshake from Microsoft and and AWS that they can't physically build.
A world-class marketing team.
Yeah, like their marketing, and the head of growth marketing and I were kind of trading LinkedIn comments, and she said social media is the new search engine, and it's a massive freaking blind spot for most enterprise security companies. Is your buyers in the next 5 years are going to be 25 to 40. It's not the 50 and 60-year-old CISOs you're selling to right now, and you have to market to them differently. And Wiz is marketing to 25 to 40-year-olds, bright colors, great swag. Like, they just get it in a way that Google never has. So I hope this acquisition works. I hope that they get what they should out of it, because I love what Wiz is doing.
So something kind of tantamount to this. It was a big deal when, oh my goodness, SourceFire. When Cisco acquired SourceFire, Cisco wasn't much of a security company. Yes, they had PICs and ASA firewalls, but Marty Resch, bringing Marty Resch in there, he kind of led them. He was the leader they needed to build out a security business within Cisco. And all that changed, and they did like at least a dozen acquisitions while Marty was still there, and really built out a significant security business. And I think you're right. This is an opportunity for them to do that with Wiz. And the research team is so world class. Like, we only have 8 stories this week, but one of the other ones, the discovery of this Ingress Nginx vulnerability that Kubernetes folks with Kubernetes are scrambling to patch this week, also comes to us from Wiz, from Wiz's researchers, all 4 of these vulnerabilities. And so just casually in the same week, they get acquired for $32 billion and find the biggest vulnerability of the month and disclose it. So they're a force for sure.
No inside baseball, but I had heard that kind of the Mandiant Google fit wasn't perfect. And so I also see Wiz as the good like cream in the middle of the Oreo that can be the bridge between Google and Mandiant. And they're like, okay, with this thing sitting in the middle, this actually makes a little bit more sense as a complete company and not just like a cart full of stuff from Goodwill.
It'd be interesting to see how they structure the the executives around it, the management structure, and if they manage to keep the leadership there, because that obviously for Cisco to have done that, they had to keep Marty there, and Marty's folks, so that'll be a sign. Like if you see the Wiz leadership, because the Wiz leadership, they have a blank check from every VC to do whatever after this, right? So keeping them there, I imagine, is not going to be super easy for Google.
I just can't wait to see what swag they have at RSA. I'm so excited.
All right, we got 3 other stories here. I'm just going to go over real quick. So this is Cloudflare open sourcing Open Pub Key. Cloudflare showed up twice. Also, they were also the article about the MCP servers. But it's a simple thing, but sometimes simple things are very exciting. So basically, it's Open Pub Key SSH integrates single sign-on with SSH, which is one of those places where I think it's that ends up being that. How was it described in the conversation with Jeff earlier today? It was a decentralized authentication. Like oftentimes SSH is somewhat decentralized. It's just admins create an SSH key or whatever, and it's not centralized in any way. So managing that identity oftentimes doesn't happen at any kind of centralized level. So I thought that was cool.
I remember seeing an early demo of Bastion Zero before they got acquired. So it's nice that now their technology got open sourced. So
there's some really good
is that what it came from?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. See, Eamon reads stuff. I put stuff in the show notes, and I hope that one of you reads it so you can talk more intelligently about it.
I was mentioning something about the Wiz thing, and then I realized I was on mute. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to say it?
No. I think to basically to coalesce everything you guys are saying, Cole says it really well. Where it's really interesting. Mandiant is a rounding error for a company like Alphabet, but they could afford Wiz, but you bet they're going to put their full resources behind making this successful once it closes. So hopefully that's good. But
yeah,
what he says is like if he keeps if they can keep the team, then it'll be work. But anyway,
yeah.
Sorry.
And then the last two here, regulation number 6. It's interesting. The current administration is trying to reduce the amount of reporting companies have to do, not preventing them from reporting cyber incidents, but reducing apparently in some cases, some of these agencies, if they have an incident, they have to report it like 6 different times to 6 different agencies. So it's an attempt to streamline that, I guess. But this is a deep rabbit hole that I did not get a chance to go far enough down. So I was a little worried that they're kind of conflating filing SAR reports with, reporting that you had a breach to the SEC. And like a SAR report is like, some bank manager embezzling $1 billion and having ransomware, 2 very different things. And they probably shouldn't share the same reporting mechanism. So that worried me a little bit, but
it also harmonizing.
Hearing,
I hope that I really hope it doesn't end up the lowest common denominator, because just like with the SEC rules for disclosure for a cyber breach, if we try to harmonize these, is it going to be holding everybody the same high standard of disclosure, or is it going to be harmonizing them down to what
an extremely low
large companies want?
I mean, selfishly, the thing I'm hoping for is to get more details about how breaches happen. And anything that gets us closer to that, I think, is going to further the industry on. The more we understand lessons learned from everybody's breaches, the more I think that'll raise everybody up, help everybody understand where we need to focus our time and energy. But we'll see. We'll see how fast the wheels turn on this one. The last item here, number 7, is a pretty good essay about toxic cybersecurity workplaces. Goes through all kinds of different stuff, touches on all kinds of different things. There's some good quotes in there. It's a good general read, and I don't think it's going to shock anybody. But they do break it down into some categories: siloed security, resources versus reality, toxic personalities in management, toxic tendencies in cyber teams. They call out the hero complex, which anybody who's read the Phoenix Project, might think of as the Brent problem, right? And a lot of this toxic stuff is not necessarily malicious in a lot of cases, like the hero complex problem. That's just a personality type, and it does create problems, but it's not because anybody's being an asshole. It's just, I don't know, maybe
Same
maybe
thing with bad
toxic isn't the
management.
best word for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the bad management is like, of course, the most technically skilled person should run the team as it grows, right? And that's not the case usually. It is when the team is 3 people and you need a more of a mentor, a technical mentor. But once a team is large, more than that, it needs a good people manager. And good people managers and good technical leaders are
Mhm.
not the same thing. And I think that I've found that in a lot of organizations that I've reported technically through, is that like the smartest technical person was made the manager, but they usually become the smartest technical person by exploiting some disproportionate advantage they have, something in
Yeah.
their personality. And then they try to get their whole team to do things the way they do them because they do them so effectively. Where a good people manager spots the disproportionate advantages each person on the team has themselves and tries to help them maximize that. And I think there's a real
Right.
big conflict when you have a super technically gifted person and you would just assume they can run a team and get that super talent out of that team. It generally requires a people manager.
And just before I read us out, I just want to read one quote from this article, and it's appropriate that it is from a Forrester report. But they say a 2024 Forrester report found that teams who were emotionally disengaged from their work experienced almost 3 times as many internal incidents. And those that lived in fear of retribution for errors experienced nearly 4 times as many internal incidents. These conditions exacerbated the risk of external attacks as well. So if you don't think security culture matters, there you go.
I mean, it's a classic team example where if you feel like you've belonged to an organization, if you feel valued, if you
Yeah.
feel some of these basic things, then you'll succeed. I read a book called Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg, a well-known book, and he outlined it all. And that's how you make teams. That's why people stay at work. It's not because of the money,
Yeah.
although that's really important. But
That is
um,
important.
you want to feel valued. You want to feel important. And so, us as security practitioners, we want to fix things. We have this natural inclination to fix things and see things improve. We can be patient and if it takes time, but if we're not able to do our job, then or if we don't feel like we're appreciated or whatever it may be, but I think that's what leads
Yeah.
to burnout.
I got the same thing out of, I'm reading Bullshit Jobs right now, and it's really interesting. I thought it was just going to be more humorous, and not get really deep. But the author's an academic, and it basically turns into an analysis of employment through the ages entirely. Like he really goes through there and digs up some stuff and digs into a lot of studies on why people work. Where to your point, it's not all about the money.
Mm.
Like people need certain things from working,
Yeah.
and if they don't get those, then yeah, the results in this Forrester report aren't terribly surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of us are mission oriented too. And if it feels like
Right.
the stuff you're doing isn't serving that mission, it's people are going to get depressed. They're going to get frustrated. The work that needs to get done is not going to get done.
Yeah. And then take a CISO that has went into 3 bad environments by chance or for whatever reason. They're gonna think that, oh, you know what? They're all like this. I'm not gonna be able to do my job, and then they're
Yeah.
just like, I'm just gonna go live on a farm or what. I don't know what they do, but It's
Yeah. They leave the industry. We do see people leaving the industry for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much, Jackie, Eamon, Sean, for joining me today. I really enjoyed episode 400. I hope episode 500 is as good as this one was. Thank you all.
Cool. It was fun. Good seeing everybody.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Next week, we'll be talking to Yevgeny Karam about soft skills for engineers and Paul Wynn about identity security. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.